Welcome to AI to Z. In Season 1, hosted by Anna Frazetta, we spotlighted big ideas in AI, health tech and beyond. Here's a look back at some of the standout moments from Season 1.
Artificial intelligence in healthcare. It's especially exciting, scary, great opportunity. So it's, I think, a lot at the same time. What's the biggest benefit? And that's it will provide consistency. Think about your doctor. Your doctor is in the morning, might be super fresh and gives you the best diagnosis. After a 36-hour shift in a hospital, a resident might not be that consistent anymore as they were before. AI, for me, helps the professionals to be much more consistent, whether they are at the end of a shift or they are just very early in their career, or they live somewhere where they don't have all the access to the latest healthcare. In computer vision, when you try to make an interpretation of a medical image, make an interpretation what it sees. Is there a polyp? Is there an inflammation? Is there a bleeding? And normally it would be the expert who finds every little polyp in that image and writes down what it is. Here, AI in healthcare can actually do that automatically to provide then the expert with an indication, hey, here might be a polyp, take a close look. Do you agree? AI helps kind of level up your game so that you are consistent in your interpretation because AI helps you.
People and process is the reason why technology, any form of technology, doesn't get as widely adopted or see the value that maybe the marketeers would highlight that you can get from it. And the reason is, we people, humans, are incredibly complex and absolutely brilliant. And so when we try and replace anything that we do as people, it's significantly harder than what most people would actually expect. The human brain, even now, is still greater than any of the commercially available AIs out there. And so when you're trying to automate work, what you're really trying to do is replace the best problem-solving capability that we've yet to invent, the human brain. And so, the reason why it's taken so long for many organizations to automate is, first and foremost, the simple stuff. Okay, you don't really use your brain that much, but as soon as you get into the vast majority of work, unbeknown to most people, because it's never written down in process documents, you are constantly problem solving, and therefore, you're adding complexity, and that complexity for many automation tools is just not something that you can replicate. Which is why, at least historically, we've got to a point, we've hit a ceiling in the realms of automation, and then we've got a little bit stuck. And I would say, today, in today's world, with things like ChatGPT and other generative AI models, perhaps we're starting to break through some of that ceiling. But certainly up to date, I think the main reason why automation has not delivered maybe the significant transformation that most people may have expected is, work is a lot more complex than most people give it credit for. And organizations have probably not understood this as well until they really have tried to replicate this work, these processes. And I guess, over the last few years, that's definitely kind of come to the fore.
IT changes are hard. Rarely do people want any changes that you're kind of throwing their way. One of the earlier ones that I went through was like taking people's physical phones away and moving them to VoIP services. And we went literally desk to desk and gave candy and, hugged people as we took away their phones. In 2018, I'd made the decision to move our video conferencing platform away from a really rich video quality platform to Zoom. But listen, the rich quality platform we were on was on-prem. It was not easy to join. And I knew strategically we had to move to something that 90% of the business could use easily. And my team hated me for that change. But the business actually accepted that change pretty well. It wasn't until the pandemic that my team forgave me. and said, we never could have lived with the on-prem platform that we had and made our way through without Zoom. But whether you're doing those kind of changes or moving from Microsoft to Google or Google to Microsoft, which happens a lot, lately, it is, believe it or not, less about the technology change and more about making sure that you're loud and you market and you're there for your business users. I often say you'll be forgiven for technology mishaps as long as the business knows what's coming. So I think over the years, over 30 years, right, of pushing IT change, what I've learned is you have to be out there loud so that people have an opportunity to freak out and say, this isn't going to work for me, and you don't know my business case. And that gives us a chance to really dig in with the business unit and figure out what nuances they have and how we can solve those nuances.
AI is a tool in your toolbox, and the return on investment needs to be there. So when you have a use case, you can see kind of how much does it move the needle for you, internal to your company, external for your clients. And if the return on investment is there, then AI is the right choice for you. So it has to do with tool in your toolbox and how you want to use that across all the industries. You mentioned the technology overload. There is so much now that's being discussed around technology and how to create efficiencies, whether it's AI related or not. I lean on, in terms of how I figure out roadmaps and technology roadmaps, I really lean on smarter people than myself, right? I am constantly reading, I'm going to conferences, I'm talking with other CTOs, chief data officers, CEOs across many different industries to identify what tools and technologies they're using. How could we bring those tools and technologies into our world at Watering Hole AI? And I also lean on our data scientists and our data engineers and our teams who are building platforms and are doing the work. I learn so much from them, and I really take into account what they're sharing back with me. I think from there, then you loop back to what are other CEOs doing in the world? How are they taking in all of this information? Because it's very overwhelming. So again, I'm reading different articles. I'm staying in touch with Fortune. I participate with an organization called Outsell, which is made up of CEOs and chief strategy officers around the world from some very large companies as well as private equity firms. And so, following that type of research and understanding what the trends are and what other CEOs are tapping into for technology, because it is overwhelming. I believe that it's really important to catch girls at a very young age when they don't have any of their own internal biases that the world has kind of quote unquote, informed them, or that they've taken in as they grow, as they continue to grow and mature. So I work with Boolean Girl. I'm on the board of Boolean Girl. We're a nonprofit that helps engage girls and non-binary students ages 3rd grade to 8th grade, really bring them into the world of STEM through active coding, active engineering programs and practices. And we work with schools, and we also lead our own clubhouse on Saturday mornings. We have an ambassador STEM series where we bring in a diverse grouping of STEM leaders around the world to virtually share once a month on a Saturday evening, virtually share their journey and what brought them to the world of STEM, whether it's engineering or it's a different form of science, geology. I mean, all sorts of women from around the world really sharing their thoughts. I mean, there are steps that can be taken today and that are being taken. They just need to be taken on a much wider stage because the numbers, they're improving. They're not improving at the rate that the need for technology brains in the world is increasing. So we really need to double down, triple down on making sure that we engage a diverse set of kids at an early age and really bring them through.
I'm an only child, and I was raised by my mom. And, I was raised at a time when I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and pretty much all of my friends had a mom and dad at home, and mom stayed home and dad went to work. And my reality is very different. From the time I was 4 years old, my mom managed restaurants, and, she was the breadwinner and she was the decision maker at home, and she was a leader. She was a business leader and a leader in the restaurant. And I worked for her for a while, which is really hard because she was very, very tough on me. But I grew up with a very different perspective on gender roles and really just the notion that there weren't limitations on what women could do and could be. And I carried that with me into my career. And, getting into tech, particularly when I got into tech in the 90s, it was still a very male dominated industry. Universities were churning out men from computer science programs, largely men from computer science programs. Leadership, all of my early bosses were all men. And so it just felt fundamentally unfair to me and unequal. And that's part of the reason, like, it's just the way that I was raised. But I think the other is, also a direct business health of the company and the team reason, which is it's kind of, if you take a step back and you say to yourself, well, we want to create the best products that we can for our customers, whomever they are. And to do that, we need really talented people. But the first thing we're going to do is not talk to half the population to find those talented people. And I think that's, that's at the root of it from a business standpoint. Is we want everyone to have opportunity. We want to bring women as well as men into computer science, into technology careers, into technology leadership, because we'll get the best talent. And we know from studies that diverse teams are so much better at problem solving. They are so much more effective at producing great things. And financially, from just a P&L standpoint, companies that have more diverse leadership, that have more diverse teams, run circles around teams that don't.
Have you ever seen a quarterback throw the ball to themselves? Never, right? Just like a pilot, he or she might fly the plane, but they were their land mechanic, flight attendants, flight operations people. They need a team. So for me, joking aside, like, I think having a sports background, having a good framework at home, having amazing coaches around me, that drilled in the mindset of it's always team first. And a team might be your internal team, might be your external team, your clients are your team, the support staff, everybody. So I think for me, that's what drove me for as long as I worked at Kforce was, my CEO at times used to tell me that I was 2 miles ahead of him in the Amazon with a machete, and they were trying to keep up. And at times that became frustrating because I always wanted to be surrounded, and I wanted to be like, when I walk into a room, I want to be like, whoa, these people they know so much about this or that. But being around, situations where I didn't know, I think was super motivating for me. But I think the thing that drove me was just I never wanted to be someone that felt like they arrived. And maybe I would be on stage giving a speech at an event, and then my CEO might say, man, you did X, and now but you're more humble than you were last year. And whenever he would say that, that's what drove me. We usually don't control much in the staffing industry, except for two things I always used to say. We controlled our attitude, how we showed up, and we controlled our effort, right? I didn't control our product. I could try to control the process and influence the process of how we work with clients or work with us in our teams. Think about how many times in the staffing industry, sales, account management, AEs, account executives will say, yeah, I did my part. I got the clients, but our recruiting team stinks. They didn't fill the job. They're horrible. Delivery sucks. Delivery's not doing their job. Or, man, our salespeople they're so lazy. They're not picking up the phone. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. It's always blame, 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 blame. And so, like, I always used to like to ask ourselves internally when I worked at Kforce, even now as I'm consultant to other staffing firms, I'll say, think about if there was a camera right now, and this camera was being watched by Insight Global, Tech Systems, Kforce, Airswift, all the other companies. Imagine if they've visually watched you arguing internally, and how would your competitors feel? They'd be so happy to see you guys wasting time talking internally. So we already have enough competition, so we don't need to be competing internally. But just like as a seller, if we don't fill a role or fill a client need, have I done everything in my power to make my life from my delivery partner, my recruiting partner, easy? Did I set process? Was I clear with communication with the client on what expectations? Did I truly hear and listen to all the things that are important? Or did I just kind of half ASS it and wing it and expect someone to just miraculously fill the most unfillable job in the world? And usually it's like when we kind of slow down so we can go faster and have that self-reflection, gaps are exposed.
There is a difference between performative confidence and authentic confidence. And I'll talk about the book in a moment. But one of the things that I think is very important for all of us is, as a society, we've been cultured to have a superhero facade, right? I got it all under control, fake it to make it, right? And one of the things in being mentorable, it is enlisting people to help you along the way. It is actually being open and vulnerable to the criticism and not pretending that you are perfect, that you have everything under control. Not that you can't go in as your strongest self, because by the way, the strongest people are the ones that realize things don't get better, things don't get easier, we just get stronger. And I think that is a mindset flip for a lot of people to say, but I don't want to admit weakness. And I'll say, you're not admitting weakness. When you say, what's one thing I could improve on? Great, I'm working on that. And it's a very active conversation that you have, and it becomes an open dialogue. So that's what I mean by mentorable. It's not that you're not strong, that you're not advocating for the best version of yourself, but the most confident people in life, like I can tell you, I make a million mistakes every day without any form of embarrassment or shame. You know, my company is not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes, but we use them as learning experiences to get better over time.
One of the biggest shifts that we've seen, especially in the past few years, is from data should be understood by only these certain folks to data needs to be understood by everyone in the organization in order to make sure that we have a common data vocabulary, that we are leveraging the data that we have more effectively, and that we're empowering everybody to do their jobs better and to support stakeholders and constituents and clients more effectively. So that's one of the biggest shifts that we've seen, where we're at this point where data is for everyone. You're hearing about data democratization, data literacy, and people are just excited to be able to use it better, regardless of the position that they're in. I consider myself a realistic optimist. So I like to think that overall it will be helpful to us as a society. The explosion that we've seen in interest in AI and generative AI has really been fun to watch in some ways. People are understanding what this technology can do. And it has existed, just like we talked about, data science and machine learning has existed for many, many decades. The same with generative AI. It's been around for a while, but only now are we seeing that shift because it's become more accessible to everyone. If you are working with AI, if you're working in a company that's leveraging AI, ask questions. That's the one request I have. Ask questions about where the data is from, how it has been collected, what are the models that are being used, how is the output being used, what are the layers of accountability that we have. All of those questions will ensure that we are maintaining a level of responsibility and mitigating as much harm as possible. It's really up to us, right?
When we were all, say, in the same office building, a leader could walk the hallways, get to know people, and learn about their team members. Now, to do that, you have to be willing to share more of yourself. You have to show your weaknesses, your quirks, kind of what makes you interesting and what makes you you in a much more explicit way. You can't assume that that connection just happens. You really have to give a lot more. So to your point, it's encouraging people to be who they are all the time, whether kind of so that they're bringing their full selves to work. Again, with the notion that if you're bringing your full self, you're going to do the best work. I love it when I see people who have in their footers that I work these hours, you may work different, realize that I'll respond to you when I'm able, like in this zone of time. So to set expectations. And it's to your point earlier that notion of really actively communicating and setting expectations around what does it look like to be remote? What does it look like to participate in a workforce that is remote, that is different, and that there's an expectation of difference it's fantastic. And I think it's helped empower team members to feel that they have a voice and that they should use their voice, even if they don't always agree with what kind of management or leadership is saying. The fact that they can articulate that and to put something out there is really important. That needs to be heard. It can't always change things because, as you know, business is business. And there are certain restrictions that we live within.
But having that voice helps us kind of make decisions going forward. And having those inputs are really critical to making good long-term decisions.
We need to experiment. We need to be applying it into our businesses. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're double checking the data that we're getting out. We're confirming that the messaging is coming out properly, because we got to remember these platforms want to provide an answer. And so they're going to give us some sort of answer. We have to just weigh that answer and then drill down and ask further questions. So I think that's one part. And that's going to lay into, the ethics around what this means, as a society, what's going to, change, and, how do we adapt for that? I think many of the jobs that people have today are going to disappear. But many new jobs are going to get created as a result of this. It's not just going to be, oh my God, all these people lost these jobs, which we've shifted a bit to more recently, where you're really communicating with the team members. You're understanding what their path, where they want to go, and how you can help them as a leader. My role is to help them become successful. And, most of the time, I really want to make sure that they're successful within our organization. But if I'm true to making sure they're successful, then we'll benefit at the end as an organization.
Thanks for joining us on the AI to Z podcast with Anna Frazzetto. If you found value in today's episode, consider following for more insightful STEM discussions. We'll be back with another deep dive. Until then.